do writers have a higher anxiety level than most people? It kind of seems like writers do have a higher level of anxiety than most people, and I think this is evident by how hard they are on themselves and how they think that they have to make something perfect, which I think is actually a detriment to your writing experience. I think it's a detriment to getting anything done, but that's a different conversation. Today we're going to be talking about your anxiety levels to a certain degree, but specifically we're going to be talking about self-forgetfulness and the importance of self-forgetfulness when you're writing. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. So I don't want to downplay the importance of awareness, okay? I don't want to downplay the importance of you being aware of yourself and how you fit into the world, because I think that's an important part of writing. I'm not downplaying that at all. I've talked about this in the past. I've talked about this idea how when you are a writer, you're trying to look at the world, you're trying to see the world the best you are able to. You're trying to understand the world, and you're trying to take that understanding and synthesize it or distill it into words that you can put on the page so that other people can, what I say again and again and again, think your thoughts after you. I think the whole goal of writing, I think one of the central goals of writing is getting people to think your thoughts after you. And your thoughts aren't necessarily words. They aren't necessarily abstractions. They're not mathematics all the time. Sometimes your thoughts are feelings. Sometimes your thoughts are events playing out in front of you. And what happens is you take in those events, you understand those events from your perspective, from your biases, etc., and you have memories of those events. You have memories that have ideas in them. You have memories that have certain perspectives in them. You have memories that have feelings, that have emotions connected to them, and you're trying to convey those memories as fully as you can to the person reading what you're writing. So I think it is very important to understand how you interact with the world so you can understand what your biases are. You can understand where you're standing. And this goes for everybody, because I think sometimes what happens is we say, oh, this group or this person or whatever it is, they need to do this, but this other group or this other person doesn't need to do this. And I think that's a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing for society in general. I think it's a bad thing as a writer. I think if you want to be a writer, whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever your family is like, understand who you are so you can understand how you fit into the world, so you can see what your biases are, so you can have your mind open, so you can think about different ideas that are not just your ideas. So you can actually engage with the world, and you can try to be unbiased, and you can try to step back from it as much as possible. Because one of the most uninteresting things that I find about writing, or what I see in writing, is that people get so much into their own heads, and people trust so much in their own ideas that they push their idea forward as the only idea that should be accepted. And this does happen a lot, unfortunately. And I think it happens more with people who are bigger writers, who are bigger creators. It probably is the case that less people tell them they're wrong. And I think this idea that you have a higher level of anxiety as a writer. I think that's a good thing to a certain degree. I think that it's something that can actually help you, because you're not just pushing your own ideas forward. You need to give other people their say. You need to give other ideas their say. You need to give other perspectives their say. And I've talked about this in the past, how you should not straw man ideas that are opposite yours. You know, it's easiest to look at the political side. If you're on one side of the aisle and you say, oh, those people on the other side are so stupid, and you write someone who's stupid from the other side, you are making a straw man of that person on the other side. You're not actually writing them in a way that is fair, and you should write them to the best of your ability, to not write them as a straw man. Write them as if they actually think their ideas, because if in that case you are trying to convince someone to think your way, which you're making propaganda if you think about that, unfortunately. But if that's the goal of what you're writing, by writing a straw man on the other side, you're going to have a lot of people running into that straw man, and they're going to think, man, this is not realistic. This isn't how people work. I know people like this. This is This is a stupid book. And you can do this for anything, right? If you are someone who doesn't like cigarettes, and you have someone who's a cigarette smoker in your book, and you don't give them a fair hearing, you don't present them in a way that's realistic. They might be a cigarette smoker, but they might be like, man, I hate it. I don't want to do it. I wish I could break this addiction, but there's so much stress in my life and it's really, really, really hard. But if you present them as just a bad person or a weak person, it's not fair. You can do the same thing with drug dealers. And I think that Breaking Bad did a good job with this because they had very complex characters. They had these drug dealers, and the drug dealers weren't just these bad people. They were more complex than just bad. And there were good aspects to them. The main character of that whole show is someone who is trying to do the best for his family and makes very bad choices in doing it. And one of my favorite characters in that show, who I think is extremely relatable, is Jesse Pinkman. I just really like that character. I think that he is a very sympathetic character who you want him to do better. And he's a drug addict, and he's a drug dealer as well in that show. And he helps this bad person, this person who becomes worse and worse throughout the show. He helps the main character become worse and worse, but at the same time, you want him to succeed, right? The people writing that show gave the characters a shot. They tried to make a full person instead of making it a two-dimensional person. So I think understanding yourself and understanding the people around you, understanding your world, and giving those people the benefit of the doubt and saying, hey, I disagree completely with these people, but I'm going to write in a way as if they actually have good ideas or they've actually thought through what they believe. They just don't act out of pure instinct, because that happens a lot. Being aware of yourself is important. You need to know how to look at yourself to determine whether what you are doing is good in the writing sphere in general. But I think many writers, as I said before, are hypersensitive to being bad when they're bad, when they make errors. They're hypersensitive to their own errors. And the issue with this is if you're hypersensitive to your own errors, I have a friend who does this. I don't know if he still listens to this. I have a friend who does this. So, if you're listening to this is for you, I guess, who is so hypercritical about his errors in writing, and he's trying to seek the best writing possible that he doesn't get writing done. What happens is he freezes up with the writing. Well, I don't know if he freezes up, but he just takes forever to get through the writing itself. And it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all, because you don't get through the writing when you write. And I think that when we write, we should try to get to a state, especially in the first draft, because oftentimes the first draft is the hardest for people to get through, because I think most people are working on first drafts, because getting past the first book, I think, is hard. And then once you get past the first book, it gets easier and easier and easier and easier to write books. I don't ascribe to this idea that writing is a writer is a person that writing is the hardest for. I don't ascribe to that. I think writing is easier for a writer because a writer does it again and again and again and again, and they get better and better and better at it. I don't ascribe to this idea that it becomes harder and harder and harder because you become more and more critical. I think that you should get away from being so critical, especially in those first drafts. And it can be easier for you if you get away from that. And I think that this manifests itself for writers in this idea of self-forgetfulness. When you are being self-forgetful, when you can get to this state of self-forgetfulness, it can be extremely useful for your writing. It can be extremely useful in the process of writing, and it can be extremely useful in the process of every single stage of writing, okay? It's kind of like going through an experience. This is kind of how I convey self-forgetfulness to people. Self-forgetfulness is not forgetting you exist, but it's being caught up in an experience, okay? So if you've ever been on a roller coaster, and I don't like rides, but if you've been on a roller coaster, if you've been somewhere you're afraid, you're in a haunted house, or if you've been anywhere that's exciting, or if you're going on a date, with somebody you really like, and you're just caught up in the experience. Sometimes you feel nervous, but the excitement, the butterflies in your stomach, the fear in some cases, the exhilaration, it overtakes what's going on. It subsumes you. It is what you are experiencing. And I think you can push yourself toward doing that throughout the whole entire writing process. When you're doing your planning, which again and again and again, I say do a certain amount of planning. It's good. It's important. in my opinion. When you're doing your planning, you can try to get into the state where you're relaxed enough so you're imagining what's going on, right? You're like, man, and you allow it to be fun. You allow your mind to go different places. You allow yourself to try out different plot lines and see if they're going to work, and you allow yourself to explore different characters and all these different things. And you can do that in the planning process. You can be like, yeah, this is a good idea. That's a good idea. Yeah, I could try to get this in. And then you do the same thing when you're doing the first draft, right? You are allowing yourself to go. You're allowing yourself to be self-indulgent to a certain degree. You're allowing yourself to experience what's going on. I think Stephen King said that the first draft is when you're telling the story to yourself. Well, what happens when you read a book that you really like? You get caught up in that story. You go through this process where you forget yourself and you imagine yourself in the situation of that character. You're not worried about things. And I think you need to try to create a habit within yourself where you are creating the same thing in your first draft, where you're not trying to be the best. You're not trying to write perfectly. You're not trying to get the best words out. You're not trying to create the best book in the world. You're trying to experience that story, and then you're trying to take that story and put it on the paper the best way you're able to, right? I think that one thing that can help with your first draft is actually writing as if you're trying to convey this story to a specific person you know. I think that can be much more powerful, because what it does is you're experiencing the story for yourself. And then you have to think, how can I make so-and-so understand what is going on in my head? It's kind of like telling a story about your own life to someone you know. And I have a group of friends who like person-to-person storytelling about things that are actually happening to themselves. So they have to think, who am I? What is this story? Who are my friends? Who are the people I want to tell the story to? Who is this specific person I'm trying to convey this story to? And how can I get that idea across to them, right? And by doing that, you're not focusing so much on yourself. You're focusing on that experience of the story. And you have to run through how that story plays out in your head and how you interact with it emotionally. And then you put it on paper for that other person. Self-forgetfulness. You're not so focused on yourself. You're not focused on your errors. You're not focused on the issues you have with writing. You're focused on getting things down and trying to explain something to someone else, even if it's not perfect. And I think the same thing happens with the edit, right? I think that you can be extremely focused on the errors with the edit without becoming self-obsessed or without becoming nervous or anxious. I think that you can look at your errors as if you're just trying to say, okay, let's read these things out loud. Let's try to get this in the best. Let's have fun with this. You know, when you're having fun, you become more self-forgetful, and maybe that's what I'm trying to convey here. Have fun with what you're doing. Have fun with the edit. Go through the edit. Read something. Don't think about the whole entire book. Think about that one thing you're reading. Think about that one thing you're editing, and think about, how can I make this really good? How can I make this part fun? How can I make this part exciting? How can I make this specific paragraph something I can be proud of? How can I make this specific paragraph something I want to read again and again and again, because the paragraph is just written in a way that it flows. It goes from one idea to the other in a way that just it sings, right? And we're not going to be perfect about that. We're never going to be perfect in that way. But I think that when you look at it that way, it disengages you from this nervousness, this fear that you're going to be failing, and it wraps you up in the process, and you're experiencing things more fully, right? I think that's what happens. I think what happens when we have too much anxiety is that we actually don't experience things as fully as we could. We don't see things as clearly as we can. We're prideful about our anxiety. We think, we've got this anxiety. It makes me worry about things. It makes me aware of what other people aren't aware of. But at the same time, it doesn't allow us to experience things as fully, because we've got this worry in the back of our heads that keeps on circling around again and again and again, and it locks your brain in a specific type of thing. It locks your brain in a specific thought. And if you're locked in a specific thought, it's going to be a lot harder to be creative about that thing. So I think it's important to try to be focused on the single thing we're doing now instead of looking forward to everything we have to do or looking to our errors. And we're trying the best to do what we have to do, but we're taking it in steps. We're taking it piece by piece, because we can't take it all at once. I cannot write a book all at once. It's physically impossible. I've never heard of a person writing a book all at once. it at least takes a few days, even if you want to, or at least takes a few hours. You can do it. You can write a first draft in one sitting, but I've never heard of someone writing an entire book that is complete in one sitting. And if there is someone out there who's listening who can write a book and have it polished and done in one sitting, you don't need to listen to this. This is for all the rest of us. This is for all the rest of us common people who don't know how to do what you can do. All right. So again, relax, take it easy, and have fun with it. Forget what's happening. Get caught up in the process rather than worrying about the end result, because that is probably going to end you up with a better book than if you worried about the result the whole entire time. And no, I don't know if that's correct grammar, but we're going to leave it right there. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support me, there's really one simple thing you can do. You can go to danielpoppie.com/newsletter and sign up for my newsletter. And when you sign up, you'll actually be able to get access to my publication roadmap. So that's everything I have planned for pretty much every project I have into the next decade. Again, that is danielpoppie.com/newsletter. You can also find the link below.